ourselves to face the future world. We present to you DAKSH 2023. Members of the audience, a very good afternoon to one and all present here. Christ University is pleased to bring to you all the brand new edition of DAKSH, the annual flagship event of the university. I, Siddharth Dinesh, shall be your MC for the day. DAKSH, the annual Education and Career Guidance Fair, hosted by the Student Council of Christ University, is a one-stop destination for all things education. At DAKSH, you get to witness exclusive opportunities and imperative student guidance, acquire varied knowledge, and make informed choices regarding your education and your career. Now, moving on to the speaker for today. Mrs. Neha Cadabam is an executive director at Cadabam's Group, one of the leading mental health care providers in the country. Having begun her career as a psychologist, she has also ventured into the space of entrepreneurship with her own brand Mind Talk Buddy. As a psychologist, she specializes in helping children overcome their daily life stresses and works closely with various schools, curating their school mental health programs. She also champions the cause of preventive and promotive mental health care, advocating for greater awareness of mental health disorders amongst our populace. Her immense experience of over 12 years and understanding of mental health make her one of the most sought after psychologists in Bengaluru. Ma'am, it is a great honor for all of us to have you here, and we are truly grateful for your presence. And now, without any further ado, we present to you a talk on career prospects in psychology. We request you, ma'am, take the dais and kindly enlighten us with your words of wisdom.
Change it. I'll change it. No problem. I'll be sitting in it. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me? Lovely. Um, it's nice to be here. Um, I'm an ex-Christite. I studied at Christ from 2005 to 10, and it's happy to be back here. Also, have one of the professors who taught me. Happy to be sitting in front of him and speaking here today. Okay, before we start about careers in psychology, I'd like to share my own experience of making a career choice. I think a very hard decision. The question I think that starts haunting you since I think your eighth high school, probably. What am I going to do? People ask you, what is it that you want to do? Are you sure of what you want to do? Do we know that early what is it that we want to do? How many of you all had some clarity of where you want to be headed in your high school? Any raise of hands? Okay. Okay, that's nice. How many of you all have clarity, say, in your 11th, 12th, or in your PU? Of okay, nice. How many of you all have clarity now where you want to head? Okay, okay. I like the honest answer. Um, I still remember in my 10th standard graduation, we were given chits where we had to write where you see yourself 5 years from now. Can you guess what I wrote? Do you think it was psychologist? No, yes. No, it wasn't. It was a chartered accountant. I wanted to become a CA then. Why? I was just good at math. I knew that. And I came from a family where everyone studied commerce. I think I was the first person who studied something apart from commerce. Um, Definitely, I think I have to be very thankful to my parents that they allowed me to experiment with what I wanted to do. So yeah, I started with CA, and I think later I said no, not CA, journalism. And then when I started journalism and I studied psychology, I said no, I think that's what I want to do, right? So don't stress out if you feel you don't know where you're headed. Go by what your heart tells. Think practically, but also ensure it's something that you have an interest in, right? Something that works very well in terms of making a career choice. I would say three things. One, make sure you have an interest in that field because you probably plan to do that for the rest of your life, right? So without interest, I think you can probably push yourself for a few years, but beyond that will be challenging. The second is aptitude, skill set, whether you think you'll be able to do that, right? And the third is personality, right? I'm a very people person, right? And when I thought CA is such a desk job where I have to sit in front of a system and probably just deal with numbers all my life, I said, no, I don't think I can do this, right? So your personality also, in a lot of sense, has to match or tally with the kind of work that you do. So please ask this to yourself, evaluate your pros and cons of each of the job opportunities that you get. Um, Something which I didn't add in this, but I think out of personal experience, I maybe could say it may apply, it may not apply. Also about the kind of family you come from, whether your family is going to be okay, or are you going to fight a battle with your family for the rest of your life for a career decision that you made. So the culture, the family, if your job requires you to travel. So just try and evaluate all your options holistically. I mean, you will never have a foolproof plan, but we can just try and eliminate um, and shortlist your options in the best way possible. Why psychology? I'm assuming people sitting here have decided to take up psychology or are considering taking up psychology. Um, does this job have potential? Yes. Does this job pay you well? Yes. Do you have growth opportunities? Yes. I think right now, a recent study that I read, psychology related jobs are growing at a 14% year on year. So, in terms of potential and scope, I think there is a lot. Okay. So, definitely evaluate your options if you think that is your calling, that is what you feel like you want to consider. Pathways in psychology. So, what are the degrees that you do in terms of psychology? I think a lot of these details you all already know, so I'm not going to ponder too much over this, but I will definitely talk to you about your job opportunities when it comes to, okay, what if I do this and what if I do this, right? Bachelor's, I think we all know bachelor's, there are honors. I think a lot of dual degree programs are starting, and then you have your triple majors. Scope of many universities and colleges across India are offering these courses. So um, I think before you choose, it'll be helpful if you could understand the university, understand the course, try and go through the course syllabus, see if that relates to what you want to do. Sometimes it's possible that you don't know what you want to do, but you probably want to do psychology. That's also fine, right? Um, yes, and then your masters. Question whether um, where do we stop? I think it's really more, it's a very personal call whether you stop at masters or you do MPhil or you do PhD or you do an additional certification or courses or diploma courses. I think psychology being a healthcare field, it's again very important to keep yourself updated and keep upgrading yourself. So a lot of additional certifications or courses, I think, is definitely something that you should keep in mind, so that it helps you keep updated with things and trends in psychology. So I think that way education will never stop. I think it doesn't stop for anyone, and it shouldn't, right? Um, yes. I think I couldn't put an exhaustive list. I already felt that there was too much content on the slide, but there's opportunities a lot more. I think here's where I'm going to ponder a lot more over. Happy to take questions towards the end that you'll have. So I'll go one at a time. I put out, I think, the most popular, according to me. I've put out the courses in that sequence, especially at the first five, six. Clinical psychologist. Now, for being able to practice or being able to be called as a clinical psychologist, um, you have to have done at least MPhil, right? Your master's in philosophy. MPhil in clinical psychology is something that's a mandate, after which you need to register with the Rehabilitation Council of India, RCI, and you will have your license number. And that's when you are allowed to practice as a clinical psychologist, right? So your bachelor's, master's, you can even decide to take a year or two break uh, where you get some work experience and then move on to do an MPhil, right? MPhil and then PhD. Um, if you choose to, but it's not mandatory for you to practice as a clinical psychologist to have done PhD. But I think in psychology, the higher your education and higher the years of experience, the higher the pay, right? So it's a decision that you need to make. There are also sidey options that are, I think internationally there are a lot of places that do offer. In the Indian scenario, I'm not very sure how many of them offer that yet, right? So yeah, so as a clinical psychologist, your main role will be your diagnosis, assessment, psychotherapy, and interventions. You will be doing a lot of work with the clinical population, so people with illness, right? Um, so here, I think when it comes to your personality, I think it's very important that you think you are strong enough to be able to deal with that population, because it can be a very difficult population to deal with. I don't think um, it's an easy cup of tea for everyone, right? Um, Many times when I interview students, they say, I had someone in my family, I have seen this, so I want to contribute back. I think that's great, but it's important whether you're able to take it for yourself. So how do you decide that? I think internships is a very good options. Um, 1 day exposure, 1 week I don't think you have 1 week internships. 1 day exposure is available. Otherwise, your 1 month internship, 3 months, where you're clocking in a few hours every week. So I think internship will be a great way for you to decide um, whether clinical psychology is a field that you want to pursue. Another very important suggestion, if you all do take up psychology, I think I will suggest that you all do your internships in different areas of psychology. Because I think the opportunity, I mean, earlier, I mean, when I studied here, there were only two courses in psychology, counseling psychology and clinical psychology, right? And now I think you all have so much more opportunity. I think you all should, one, definitely grab onto those opportunities. But when you're doing your internships, try and do it in different areas of psychology, right? Maybe with a school, maybe with a rehab center, maybe with a corporate if there are options, psycho onco. I think the options are umpteen. So definitely try and get exposure at different areas. I think that will help you understand where you're where you're able to contribute and you see yourself fit into that role as well better, right? Moving on to counseling psychologist. Um, so counseling psychologist as such in India does not, there is no governing body, there is no licensed body for you to be practicing as a counseling psychologist. Even after your masters, you can practice counseling psychology. Very important, both for your benefit and the client's benefit. It has to be under supervision. Okay, when you're doing therapy sessions, there are a lot of people who are independent practitioners or even practicing with organizations. But please make sure, if your organization isn't offering, push them to offer supervision or guidance, right? Because I think we're not ready for dealing with the client's issues, right? It's very important how we are able to professionally put our cap on and help the client with the issues that they're going through. So for counseling, um, counseling psychologist, I think the options, um, um, corporates, I think there's a lot of job opportunities there where there is an option of online and offline counseling. A lot of counseling centers. Um, yeah, I think the options with counseling psychology is a lot more. Um, You can be a part of organization where you'll be allocated with specific corporates as well, right? Um, Try and ask to get more variety of experience if you think that's possible, because more the exposure rather than being limited or restricted to one area. I think that way you'll get a greater exposure. Industrial or organizational psychology, again, with a lot of work with organizations and corporates and MNCs. Here it's going to be more in terms of employee engagement, your HR. So you'll be working very closely with the HR, right? So it could be organizational structure to the kind of work, employee conflicts. So a lot of subtle things, but a lot of interpersonal and intrapersonal within the organization. I think that's what you'll be focusing on. School counselor or psychologist, I think another role that's really picking up very well. Um, when I started my work and I had approached a few schools talking to them about CBSE has made it mandatory for every school to have a counselor. So do you have, or is there something that we can do? Maybe we could visit, maybe I could visit a few days. And there were at least 4 schools I visited, and all of them, literally all of them, had their social studies teacher or science teacher who was doubling up to be a counselor. Okay, and this I'm talking 2010, 11, right? So a good 12 years back. Suddenly makes me feel old. But yeah, okay. But now I think many schools have taken this a lot more seriously. I think COVID also, I think we can give the credit. It has really given a lot more importance for mental health. Um, so yes, I think when you are working as a school counselor, what happens is you conduct life skills classes or group sessions. You conduct individual sessions for students. So students will either be referred by the teacher or self-referred or referred by a parent. So I also work with a couple of schools through Cadabams. We have a tie-up with various schools that we work with. So we do a lot of intense work there. I think it's a very promising field, and I think issues in children start way early. Um, so I think there's a lot of need and there's a lot of scope as well to do, right? So that's what you do with your school counselor. Now again, sometimes it's a little confusing. School counselor and where is that? Educational psychology. Okay, it may seem little similar, but it's not similar. And even special educator and shadow teacher, I think they all seem to be a little bit close by, so to say, but it's not so much. Like I said, as a school counselor, you'll probably address issues like bullying, self-esteem, gender orientation, interpersonal conflicts, dating, breakups in students, academic issues more in terms of what I'm going through personally and how that impacts my academics, right? So like family conflicts, we have a lot of single parent. We've also had cases of child sexual abuse that we've addressed. So a lot of these things is what comes under the role of a school counselor. When it comes to educational psychology, it's a lot to do with teaching methodologies. So it's where you collaborate with the teachers and um, talk to them about various classroom strategies or teaching strategies, even identifying children with academic issues. So it's a lot to do with those. It will also include your assessments, screenings that you do for children. Um, Again, special educator are children with special, probably with borderline learning disability, or so who need those specific focus or attention. It could be your ADHD, SLD, autism spectrum, all of those children. You'll be working very, very close to them on a regular basis. So that's the role of a special educator. And shadow teacher is where you work one-on-one with a child, right? So you get signed up with a child for a year. So that academic year, you are throughout there with the child throughout their academic year. So if they're in the classroom, you are there with them, helping them, right? So that's another area of option that you have. I think another very budding thing is content creation. um, content creation just as a field itself, like there's a lot of demand for content creation. It could be blogs, it could be articles, it could be videos, Instagram reels. So there are many organizations that hire people specifically to create content related to psychology, and the need there is background in psychology. So if you feel want to do psychology but don't really want to practice, don't want to deal with the issues of clients, I think this is a great space you can explore in terms of content writing. If, as you move on with the years, you are an independent practitioner, I think right now in the world of online and social media, it also becomes a mandate somewhere for you to do content creation for your own individual marketing, for marketing yourself as a brand, right? Or you hire someone for it. Teaching, I think, doesn't need much explanation, but in fact, some of the schools that we work with, psychology has been taught even in high school now. So, school, college, your undergrad, postgrad, and a lot more teaching options. There are some organizations that also offer basics in psychology for uh, students of non-psychology background. Just some basics for people to understand. That's your teaching. Forensic and criminal psychology. So most of your criminal investigation bureaus are the kind of people who would be hiring you. It is to deal with understanding the minds of the criminal. I think a lot of your Netflix series that you'll watch, I think will resonate with this job, but it may not seem as fancy as what you watch in Netflix. Um, One of the famous university that offers this is the one in Gujarat, the Forensic University. Y'all can look up, I think y'all will find the name. Neuropsychology, again, this is where, as a psychologist, you try and identify brain patterns or behaviors of the brain and how that relates to your body and your behavior. So again, a very promising but a very finite area, but a lot to do with anatomy. So if that interests you, I think it's a very promising field. Sports psychology. Um, uh, so this, I think, little self-explanatory, but here's where you work with sports people, okay, where how you can optimize their um, outcome of sports, right? So most of these teams, such as your IPL, Indian women's hockey team, I think Pro Kabaddi, all of them have a designated psychologist or a team of psychologists, sports psychologists that work with them. So I think we all understand your behavior has to do a lot with the way you think, what you have in mind. So to help you deal with the pressure, stress, manage and optimize your performance, right? So that's the role you play as a sports psychologist. Many of these uh, sports academies as well. Again, I think a relatively budding field, but promising definitely. Sports academies also have psychologists on board. Yes, I think education we spoke about. Child, again, you work with children. These are some areas that are really upcoming. There are no specific courses. I'm also not very familiar with specific job opportunities, but enlisted some of the other areas. I think something that I did miss adding in this is uh, tech-related jobs related to mental health. I think I'm sure all of your phone at least has one app related to mental health. I'm assuming, right? Calm, Headspace, I think some of the popular ones. Um, so they also hire psychologists for um, um, assessment building to. So basically, it's your app related, right? So as a psychologist, it'll be your expertise coming into the app or the tech based, right? So that is something that I missed adding in here, and that's definitely another great opportunity that you have. Uh, Expectations from the industry. I also hire quite a bit for my own organization. So I thought it's very important for me to talk about this. Um, I think how can you make yourself really stand out as a psychology student or as a budding psychologist? I think very important is a lot of field work. I also missed research in the previous one. I'm sorry about that. I think there's a lot of scope for research, India based research for the area of mental health and psychology. Um, yes, so a lot of internships, preferably offline, because I think that's when you really get a more deeper sense of what's actually happening. Because um, telling you this completely out of my experience, when I interview candidates who've had online internships to candidates who've had online internships, online and offline, I clearly see the people with offline internships have a better hold on the subject and of what actually goes on than someone who's doing an online. Your online internship will pretty much be just to, you know, have a tick on your checklist of internship done, right? So evaluate for yourself um, why you're doing this internship and then decide. And like I said, try and see if you can do internship in different areas so that you're able to understand where your expertise would lie. Um, your basics, please have that in place. Basics, again, not so much in terms of, okay, tell me the symptoms of depression, tell me the symptoms of, or the types of schizophrenia, right? No, but more in terms of practical application, you know? So even when you're having your classes, try and talk to your professors more in terms of, okay, so there are, say, 4 types of schizophrenia, but how do you elicit this? Okay, no client will come and say, you know what, I'm seeing people, I'm having auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations. No one's going to tell you that, right? So more in terms of practical application, in terms of how do you understand. Now, if a patient is coming in, how do you know if the person has psychotic symptoms or delirium or has had a stroke, right? So it's very important for you to understand these. So make sure you're having these conversations with your professor in more in terms of your practical application, right? Empathy. Uh, I think empathy towards your clients doesn't stop there, but with your colleagues, with the organization and everything. I think very important that you're honest, right? Even when you're joining an organization. So again, many of them who come for interview, they say, no, I'm really committed. I want to work. I'm here to work. And just in another 2 months, they say, no, I've applied for this entrance and I got through and I want to go and I want to study. Be honest when you're joining, right? We have people who say, you know, I am looking for, I'm applying for MPhil, and if I get through, I will probably go. Be honest with the organization, right? Um, I think organization, I mean, I can vouch for it. Organization will still hire you, right? If you're good, they will hire you, but be honest, right? I think it works in both your favor, both the favors. Commitment, what I spoke of, and professional ethics and boundaries, right? Ethics in terms of boundaries with your clients, okay? To, let's say, if you're moving from one organization to another, right? I think for any of you all who've been in therapy would know that sometimes you're very, when you're taking therapy with one person, you're really, you have that comfort zone with that, and when they move the organization, you're still sort of looking out for that person, right? So as when you are a part of an organization, I think you have to discuss it out with your organization as to what is expected when you move from one to the other. So I think very important for you to be verbal and open, have open conversations with the company or the organization that you're working with, right? Yeah, I think that's what it is. Uh, I'll be happy to take any questions. I kept the PPT a little short. I thought there'll be questions and I'll be happy to answer them. I've also put out my email ID. So if any of you all have any questions that you'll want to write or you'll want to connect with me for anything, I'll be happy to be able to help you out in any way. Yes.
Ma'am, what activities at the university level would you say we should engage in so as to like streamline ourselves to a psychology career?
Activities in what sense?
Like if there's some fests or some stuff that we should take part in, like to build on like apart from academics to like help in a career.
I think um, overall development is very important. I think what experiences you can go through in college, you'll rarely be able to go through it when you start working, you know. So even if there are fests or things, because I think one is academic orientation, but it's just about your holistic development as a person. And I think your social skills. I mean, there's so much more you learn from everything that you're a part of. So I think academically, I think in terms of your internship, be it your research, your dissertations, I think that's what it would be. Interaction with your professors with specific things that you'd like to discuss. Apart from that, I think anything as an opportunity of fest, I think you should, if you're able to balance out with your CIAs and your projects and all of that, I think you should definitely grab onto as much opportunities that you get.
Why do you think there is an increase in the demand for psychology as courses as well as in profession?
Right. I think one is your awareness, two is reduced stigma in some sense, three, I think with COVID, I think the kind of mental health turmoil many of us underwent. Um, so I think the need itself overall has increased. In fact, when things sort of when they started opening up in 2021, even before your second wave, and as we moved along, when I was meeting a lot of pediatricians, also they were saying that you know, children have been home, both the parents are working because there is need to work. A lot of companies are not even paying, right? And the child is on their own. So a lot of children in the COVID period have shown borderline autism symptoms, you know. There is social anxiety, there is speech delay, there is so much more. So I think uh, in fact, the number of people with anxiety has, I think I can probably say, doubled since COVID. COVID related anxiety and generally, and even when school started after COVID, um, it just took us 3 months to just get the, so the child will just walk into the counselor's cabin and say, I'm feeling too overwhelmed. When I was at home, I could switch off whenever I could. I didn't have to show my face, and I was not obligated to speak to people and greet people. But why do I have to come to school and I have to do all of this, right? So I think overall, in terms of the uh, changes in terms of the environment, and that has happened so rapidly, I think we've all just been through too much, and which is why the need first, second, awareness, and I think having counseling online has opened up a lot of opportunities for. I don't have to really walk into a place where someone will see me. You know, the kind of thing people say when they come for counseling and therapy. Um, so they can just do it from the comfort of their own home.
Do you think online mode of therapy is as effective, or like, do you think that you should consider
It's a very tricky question.
specifically
I
for
would
like
say is, sorry,
specifically for kids? Yeah, specifically.
specifically for kids. No. Honest answer, no. I mean, younger kids definitely a no. Okay, and also depends on the kind of issue. Maybe for teenagers or high school students, maybe. Maybe more again in terms of, let's say I go see my therapist and come back. I've seen a few times and I've established that rapport. And then because, you know, I have 9 to 4 school and I can't go and I have homework and I have extra classes. So definitely something is better than nothing. Okay, I'm not saying online sessions are not beneficial, they are. Okay, but I definitely feel the offline is more effective than your online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
So I just wanted to ask, like when you do work in the field of psychology,
Yeah.
it becomes really difficult to manage your personal life and your professional life. So how do you think we as students should start learning how to maintain that work-life balance?
Right. Very good question. And I think that also reminds me something that I wanted to speak about and I forgot. Um, Identify how much you want to work. Okay. Um, it may not really be of how the industry expects you to work, right? Identify the balance, okay? Um, See, now with a lot of online and offline, you can also try and filter out your job options after you finish your course based on the kind of, like if you want something flexible, right? Maybe I just want to go for a holiday, maybe I will do a work vacation, I will work from the Himalayas or something like that. Then I think doing a lot of online counseling work is something that's possible. But again, I mean, if you ask me, I feel there you're pretty much by yourself. There is limited peer learning that happens, limited supervision. So I would always say an offline is something I would definitely hands down vouch for any time over an online. But based on how you want, I think we all plan our work hours, but we don't plan our non-work hours. I think it's also very important that you plan your non-work hours, right? It could even be fixing out a calendar event for a friend's catch up. You know you're blocking that time because for you, just catching up with your friends is something that makes you let loose or makes you feel just refreshed. So it could be that, and also with psychology, I think I keep getting asked this question of how do you stay sane while working with a lot of people with issues. So I think self-care routine, as a psychologist, I'm assuming most of you all are going to become psychologists. I think self-care routines for yourself, it could be journaling at the end of the day, it could be your 10 mindful minutes in the morning, right? I think those smaller things are more important for your work-life balance than those 3 holidays in a year sort of a thing, right? So things that you do on a day-to-day basis consistently, I think that's very important. And psychologists for themselves to go through therapy if on regular basis so that you're not taking over the load, the emotional load of your clients. Thanks.
Ma'am, you've told us about different types in psychology.
Right,
So I wanted to know, suppose I'm a clinical psychologist,
right.
can I also function or work as a educational psychologist? Like, can I also go to schools, or I'm just restricted to that physical, I mean, clinical lab, room, or whatever?
Not really. You can explore yourself beyond just the clinical role, okay? But because your expertise lies there, I mean, if you ask me, can a clinical psychologist do counseling? The answer is yes. Can the clinical psychologist do educational counseling? The answer is yes, right? Because you know it from the illness perspective, so you definitely know at an early stage what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. You might need to um, make sure you brush yourself a little more with, see, as a clinical psychology, as the typical know-how of what people say is your diagnosis, assessment, and then therapy, right? But that doesn't mean any student who walks into your room, you're going to diagnose them immediately, right? So you'll have to just consciously be able to navigate that through, but you can definitely do both.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Also, another thing that I didn't mention, obviously, um, as a psychologist, I think if you will double up to take up a leadership role in organizations or even entrepreneurship, I think, of course, that's another scope that you all can definitely explore. Yes.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask, why should one like pursue a career in psychology in terms of like flexibility? Is it a flexible line of education? Like, what other doors can be open? Like, what other options are there if I want to change?
In the sense,
In the sense that
options of,
is no, I'm saying in the sense that outside, like say the clinical space
right.
or like a research space, like what other career doors are open in terms of flexibility? Why should one pursue psychology further?
I think in terms of flexibility, don't ever choose psychology. Okay. There are many other job opportunities where flexibility can be accommodated. Um I think the maximum flexibility as a psychologist comes in only when you're working one on one with clients. Okay. So let's say you're available just say half a day, or you want to work just half a day. So you open up your slots only say 9 to 1, right? Or you say you want to be available only on weekends or only on weekdays. I think so that as an individual practitioner, you have that flexibility, right? But beyond that, when you're working with organizations, when you're working with companies, you will have a mandate of, let's say, even if there you're just doing one-on-one counseling, right? You will be you will have to commit you'll have to commit to say finishing say about 10 sessions in a week, or 15 sessions or 20 sessions for the month, so however based on the requirement. So there again, in a lot of these companies, it will be like your 9 to 6 kind of a job where you're working. So again, when you're working with many companies, individual sessions is one thing you can do. Group sessions is another thing that you can do, where support groups, like it could be say depression support group, anxiety support group, addiction support group, uh, finite group of people that you all can work with. So when you're working with organizations, you will get an opportunity to do both of these, right? It'll also be about creating content to educate people about mental health. So it'll be a very holistic role where you're not just meeting clients one on one and that's about it. So there's a lot more that you can do. um, uh, I think even in terms of marketing, in terms of trends of what something as simple as when you walk into a supermarket, and there are say 10 brands of biscuits, okay, where should you place yours, what color code, so your color psychology, your display psychology. So in terms of marketing itself, there's a lot of scope as a psychologist that you can do. So I think the scope of psychology is just expanding, right? So but it's very difficult, like if you want me to name jobs, then I think those are the ones that are there, but beyond that, marketing, beat, and so many other fields has an opportunity as a psychologist. I think that it is add on to your skill that you can do. A lot of organizations also with this tech, there's a lot of app based, chat based counseling that happens. Of course, I'm not sure about how effective. So I think if it's a illness, it's definitely not effective. But if it's more in terms of your adjustment issues, or um, basic issues, non-diagnosable issues, stress, anxiety, relationship issues, broken families, disturbed families, or taking care as a caregiver, the kind of burnout you have. So I think those things, chat-based, I think those are things as well that you can do. Yes.
What is the state of psychoanalysis in India right now? And what are the process to get into it? Because it seems different from regular pathways.
Psychoanalysis is practiced intensely by clinical psychologists, but I think it's also a very controversial field to say. So, I mean, although assessments, Rorschach is probably one of the highly used assessments for diagnosing um, the clinical issues. Um, but I'm not sure of specific. I think there is an institute in Calcutta that offers specific degree or specific certifications with psychoanalysis, but I'm not very sure of that field specifically.
Ma'am, what's the scope for forensic and criminal psychology like in India?
I think the scope is quite high. Like I said, a lot of these investigations, I think psychologists do play a very important role. They also work very close with the prison inmates to understand. So the scope is definitely there.
And ma'am, like you specified for clinical psychology, it's required for us to complete an MPhil degree as well.
Yes.
So for forensic and criminal psychology, what are the requirements academically?
I think masters in forensic uh, is something that should be good enough. But like I said, higher your education, higher the pay. So there will be requirement for people with masters, people with MPhil. So you will be tagged along with someone with MPhil. So that's how it would be. So it's not like your opportunity stops with masters. You will have opportunity as a master's degree as well. You will have an opportunity as you move forward as well.
Ma'am, you said that we need at least 1 to 2 years of work experience before we do MPhil after our master's in clinical psychology. Like, if it's possible, what kind of job can we do if we have a master's in clinical psychology?
um, you don't have to do 1 to 2 years of experience. I just feel when you go with the experience to an MPhil, I think you will not be very unidimensional. Your perspective of things will broaden because you've been in the field and you go back to MPhil to sort of master it even further, right? So I would suggest that you do, but it's not mandatory. You can always directly go to MPhil if you want. Again, the kind of job opportunities that you can do is you can work with under supervision with any clinical psychologist. Hospital setting. So in your hospital setting, it will be with a psychiatrist and clinical psychologist, right? So it'll be a lot of case history taking. It'll also be a lot of assessment and trainings that you get from the clinical psychologist. So it'll be a lot. If you're looking at doing an MPhil in clinical psychology, and if you're looking at doing internship or doing work in that field itself, then it will be mostly your hospital or clinical. Otherwise, it goes beyond that to do your EAP programs, the organizations that provide your employee assistance programs. I think a lot of those programs also have the scope of that you have a scope to work there as well.
Ma'am, could you also talk about your specialization?
Yes, sorry, I didn't introduce myself enough. um, I finished my bachelor's and master's here at Christ, and I have been working with Cadabam since 2010. So that's about 12 years of experience now. I specifically work in the space of preventive and promotive mental health. Um, so I work at my own organization where we, as a team, is a team of us with clinical psychologists and psychologists, where we craft out group modules, group sessions for specific group sessions for people with specific illnesses and issues at a rehabilitation center, right? Um, so there is structured programs that we conduct there. So I work there. Along with that, I work with schools and corporates where we provide these um, emotional and mental health well-being programs. So we do talks, we do individual sessions. In fact, I think over the last about 3 years, we've developed a curriculum for the school for children from as young as 3 years up to 18 years, where in terms of the kind of exposure and understanding based on their age and their the psychological stage of growth that they are at. So we conduct talks, focus group sessions, individual sessions. So I have a team of people that I work with, and we are also a team of people. So yes, I represent Cadabams. I think if you all are familiar with the brand, Cadabams has been into the field of mental health for about 30 years now. We have specialized rehabilitation services. We have a vertical for people with psychiatric illness. We have a vertical with people for addiction related issues. We have a hospital where we have inpatient and outpatient services. We also have a center in Hyderabad, and recently we also collaborated with the Maldivian government. So we have a bunch of our members who are working in the Maldivian hospital in Hulumale. Um, Even the psycho-oncology department at Kidwai is taken care by us. So school psychology, psycho-onco, rehabilitation, clinical, we have about 17, I think if I got the number right, clinical psychologists who work with us, and about 9 psychiatrists who work with us, and we have about 45 counselors who work with us. No, I think that's 55. So that's the organization and the team that we have and the work that I do. Any more questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So, ma'am, when we pursue psychology or when we pursue a specialization in psychology, we tend to have an idea of the role that we perform when we are employed in an institution. But at times, there are institutions that just employ psychologists for the sake of employing or because it's popular or because there's a mandate there.
Yes.
And so they don't have proper policies or infrastructure in place to accommodate for the psychologists.
Yes.
So how do we deal in situations like that?
For the infrastructure or for the job role itself?
Both, I guess.
Right. Okay. I hear what you say. Um, I've had a few counselors who's worked with us, were very happy with the work that we did, and then moved on for a better pay and things like that. Today they come back and say that the pay is higher, but the role is so like very minimal. They're not really happy with the work that they do. So I think when you're picking up a job, important for you to understand what are you picking up the job for. I mean, I think mostly it's yes for everything, but are you your most important criteria, is it financial independence, like getting a higher pay job, but you're not so concerned about the work you do? Or are you really looking at doing quality work or something where you have higher work life balance, or you're ready to sort of go that extra mile so that you're able to get more experience? So I think it's important for you to understand what your criteria, or it's about personal growth. I think that again comes with your skill set and your exposure. I think that's one part of it. So again, that's something you have to answer yourself internally. I think the next part, I think it's just about how you take it with time. Even now, I think at most of the places, the schools that we work with, you have these floors where you have this one room with an odd dimension, that's given to the counselor. Right? I'm not even joking here. And we have about 4 or 5 counselors in the school, but there's only one counseling room given. Okay, so imagine if there are 5 counselors, and if they have to happen sessions, the rest of the counselors have to go wait in the library, because only one session can happen at at a time. So I think it's really about how you build rapport with the organization and eventually ask for it. But I think very important for you to constantly keep having conversations, because otherwise you are going to be in that space of, like I said, it's a checklist. We need a psychologist, so we've hired and they're there, right? But it's really about how you figure it out with them over time. Thanks. Any other questions? All right, thank you. It was a pleasure. Like I said, my email ID is there, so if you'll have more questions at any point of time, I'll be happy to answer them for you. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for a truly eye-opening session. I'm sure we all had immense takeaways and infinite learnings from today. I would now request Ms. Lynette, the faculty coordinator of the Center of Academic and Professional Support, to present the memento as a token of appreciation to Ms. Neha. Thank you, ma'am. That brings the proceedings for today to a close. We're extremely grateful to our speaker for enlightening the way to increase our knowledge. Thank you to everyone who contributed to the seamless operation of the event, including the teachers, management, volunteers, faculty coordinator, Professor Padmakumar M., and Aditi J. Mehta from the events committee. And thank you all for being such a great audience. We hope each one of you present here takes home a new slice of learning for your future endeavors, and that you're one step closer to understanding your paths better. Thank you, and this is I, Siddharth Dinesh, signing off as your MC.